Talia kept chastising Tate's childish behavior while Riley stood nearby. Stop making moral judgments about everyone who lives here. Talia released his ear. Tate immediately rubbed it, glaring at her. And stop pulling my ear in my own house. Then behave. I'll give the tour to anyone I want in my house, and I'll do it however I want. Talia raised an eyebrow. Tate. What? Try being normal for 5 minutes. Tate looked offended. I am being normal. Riley quietly cleared his throat. This is normal. Tate pointed toward him. You're learning. Tate shook his head. I'd rather be giving the tour to Noah. Noah groaned from beside Talia. He knew exactly what Tate meant. House tour with Tate had never really been just a house tour. Every floor, every hallway, every secluded room seemed to carry a memory of Tate turning an innocent walkthrough into something much less innocent. Noah knew exactly where the tour would end. Tate's destination would be his private rooms, especially throwing Noah on his bed. Once the tour was over, Tate would then take a tour of Noah's naked body by sticking his most important, sensitive hard part inside of Noah. Talia looked between them suspiciously. What? Nothing, Noah said quickly. Tate smirked. Noah groaned again. He was beginning to think Tate was deliberately reminding him that, in Tate's mind, the house tour was practically foreplay. If Tate could have paid money to make Riley disappear from Noah's life entirely, he probably would have considered it for at least a moment. Not because he wanted Riley harmed, he didn't. Tate genuinely didn't wish suffering on him. He just wanted him gone. Far away from Noah. Far away from the fragile little future Riley represented. Because Riley fit too perfectly into the kind of life Noah always drifted toward whenever he got scared, the white picket fence version of safety. The carefully organized, heterosexual-adjacent domestic life where things stayed calm, respectable, and emotionally manageable. And Tate hated how seductive that life looked to Noah. Riley was stable. Routine. Engagement rings and quiet dinners and predictable affection. The exact opposite of Tate. Tate leaned against the doorway to the living room, arms crossed tightly as Riley continued staring at the framed blue family photographs like he was trying to piece together Noah's history from snapshots. You really studying them that hard? Tate asked flatly. Riley glanced over calmly, just trying to understand where Noah came from. Tate nearly laughed at that. You won't figure Noah out from pictures. No, Riley asked mildly. Noah changes depending on who he's trying to protect emotionally. Riley's expression sharpened slightly. That sounds cynical. It's observant. Riley turned back toward one of the photos of Noah and Joey at the lake house. He looked happy here. Tate's jaw flexed. He was. And now? Tate didn't answer immediately. Because the truthful answer irritated him. Now Noah looked divided. Pulled apart. Riley represented the future Noah thought he was supposed to want. But Tate represented every dangerous emotional instinct Noah kept trying to bury alive. He's confused, Tate muttered. Riley frowned slightly. About us. Tate met his gaze for the first time. About himself. Riley held the gaze longer than most people did with Tate. It annoyed him instantly. Riley wasn't intimidated. Riley's back was turned toward Tate as he studied another gallery in the adjoining room. This collection was different from the family portraits. It was filled with Tate's family friends, socialites, business associates, celebrities they had met, prominent business owners, and even the mayor. And to Noah's surprise, Noah was on the wall too. Riley was completely absorbed in the portraits, his back to Tate. Talia had wandered into the living room to read the newspaper, leaving Tate and Noah briefly alone. Tate glanced toward Riley. Then toward his mother. Then back at Noah. Before Noah could react, Tate leaned in, groped Noah's clothed dick and hips, then French kissed him. Noah's eyes widened. He immediately pushed Tate away. Noah hissed quietly, "What the hell are you doing?" Tate merely smirked, completely unbothered. Noah glanced nervously toward Riley. "Are you trying to get us caught?" Tate shrugged. He wasn't looking. That isn't the point. Riley suddenly shifted in front of the gallery. Noah froze. Tate stepped away just in time, casually straightening his shirt as though nothing had happened. Riley turned around. "So who's this?" Riley pointed at a picture of a country music star that Terrence had invited over to their house in the late 1970s. Noah exhaled silently while realizing the kiss had awakened his dick. Fuck, he thought. Tate noticed Noah's boner and then smiled. Someone important. Noah gave him a warning look. Tate only grinned. That alone made Noah dislike him more. Any time Tate would send verbal barbs toward Riley, Noah's fiancé acted like he couldn't read the room or notice how much Tate was bothered by the blonde that wasn't Noah in the blue house. Most people eventually recoiled from the intensity in Tate once they got too close. Riley stayed calm. Measured. He genuinely believed that patience and kindness would win in the end. Tate hated how good Noah looked beside that kind of steadiness. He hated that Riley probably remembered Noah's coffee order. Probably texted him reminders to eat. Probably knew how to calm Noah down without turning every conversation into emotional warfare. And worst of all, Riley probably thought his love for Noah was healthier. That thought made something ugly tighten in Tate's chest. You love him, Tate said suddenly. Riley blinked once at the abruptness. Yeah. Tate nodded slowly to himself like he was confirming something unpleasant. I can tell. Riley studied him carefully now. You do too. The statement hit with uncomfortable precision. Tate looked away first. That obvious, he muttered bitterly. To someone paying attention, Riley's voice stayed calm. You look at him like losing him would kill you. Tate laughed quietly under his breath. That's dramatic. No, Riley said softly, I don't think it is. The room grew tense again. Tate's eyes drifted toward the kitchen, where Noah's voice carried faintly through the house. Every instinct in him revolved around that sound automatically. Like gravity. Like a habit. Like addiction. Tate wanted Noah close constantly. Not isolated. Not controlled. That was the frustrating part. Tate knew the difference. He didn't want Noah to be friendless, dependent, or trapped. He wanted Noah free to laugh, travel, build a life, and have people who cared about him. Tate just never wanted anybody to matter more to Noah than he did. That was the ugly truth underneath everything. Tate and Riley went to the back patio area near the pool as Tate showed off the family's wealth and numerous rooms where Noah and Tate had spent their childhood. If anyone, man or woman, threatened Tate's place beside Noah emotionally, something territorial and desperate surfaced inside him almost immediately. Not because he wanted ownership. Because he wanted permanence. He wanted mornings beside Noah. Years beside Noah. A lifetime of sleeping beside him, arguing with him, hearing his footsteps through a house late at night. And Riley stood directly in the path of that fantasy. You know what your problem is? Riley asked carefully. Tate smirked faintly. Only one. You think love means becoming irreplaceable. Tate's expression cooled instantly. And you think love means being safe, Tate replied. Riley didn't react to the jab. That's not an insult. To you maybe. Riley folded his arms loosely. You talk about Noah like he's constantly on the verge of disappearing. Because he is. No, Riley shook his head, he's on the verge of choosing. Those words landed harder than Riley probably intended. Tate looked away sharply. The thing Riley didn't understand was that Tate had spent years feeling people slowly pull Noah away from him, piece by piece. Joey. Mark. College. Distance. Now Riley. Every new attachment in Noah's life made Tate feel the ground shift beneath him. And no matter how much Tate hated himself for it, some instinct deep inside him always wanted to eliminate the threat. Not violently. Not cruelly. Just thoroughly. If Riley got a new job across the country tomorrow, Tate would probably celebrate privately. If Noah got cold feet about the wedding, Tate would encourage every doubt. If some opportunity appeared that put distance between Noah and Riley, Tate knew he would quietly push Noah toward it without hesitation. Because Tate loved Noah in a way that made neutrality impossible. You're thinking about how much you dislike me right now, aren't you? Riley asked suddenly. Tate laughed once. You really want honesty? Usually. I dislike what you represent. Riley absorbed that without visible offense, which is. A life Noah chooses when he's scared. Riley's face tightened slightly for the first time. You think he's with me because he's afraid. I think Noah confuses peace with love sometimes. And you confuse intensity with destiny. That one shut Tate up briefly. Tate closed the pool door and led Riley back through the kitchen, living room, dining room, and then past the family photo gallery. Riley stepped closer to the family photos again, eyes lingering on another picture of Noah smiling beside Joey. He wants a future, Riley said quietly, not just feelings. Tate's voice lowered dangerously. You think I can't give him one. I think you don't know how to love him without needing him. The silence afterward felt razor-thin. Tate stared at Riley for several long seconds. Then quietly, and you don't understand that some people only feel alive when they're needed back. Tate led Riley up the sweeping staircase in tense silence, one hand sliding along the polished mahogany banister worn smooth by generations of the Blue family. The mansion seemed even larger at night. Warm golden light spilled from antique sconces along the walls, illuminating oil portraits, old photographs, and enormous arched windows overlooking the estate grounds outside. Every footstep echoed softly beneath the impossibly high ceilings. Riley glanced upward as they reached the second-floor landing. This place is enormous. Tate gave a humorless smirk. 26 rooms. My grandmother used to say rich people build houses too large because they're afraid of being alone with themselves. Riley almost smiled at that. Almost. Tate turned down the east hallway first. This wing's mostly guest rooms now, he said flatly. He opened the first set of double doors. Inside sat a formal sitting room with cream-colored walls, antique velvet furniture, a marble fireplace, and towering bookshelves filled with leather-bound novels nobody had touched in years. Riley walked in slowly. This feels like a hotel. It basically is. Next came the upstairs library. Dark oak shelves climbed all the way to the ceiling, complete with a rolling brass ladder and a painted mural overhead depicting ships crossing violent seas. Riley paused by the windows. Noah mentioned Joey used to read here with him. Tate's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Yeah. There was an old chess table in the corner. A half-finished game still sat untouched. Riley noticed Tate looking at it. You used to play, Riley asked. Joey cheated constantly. Despite himself, Tate almost smiled faintly at the memory. Then the expression vanished again. He moved on quickly. This is the Blue guest suite. The next room looked larger than most apartments, complete with a canopy bed, attached marble bathroom, private balcony, and sitting nook overlooking the gardens. Then came another suite. And another. A music room with a black grand piano. A private study lined with old Blue family documents. An embroidery room Tate admitted nobody had entered in years. A sunroom overflowing with orchids and glass cabinets full of delicate porcelain imported from Europe decades earlier. Riley glanced around carefully as they walked. You grew up here. Unfortunately. You say that like it was miserable. Tate shrugged. Money makes people quieter about their problems, doesn't erase them. He led Riley farther down the hallway and down a flight of stairs to the third floor. This was Joey's dark blue bedroom when he stayed over. It's 3 doors down from my room and directly faces the spare room. Riley glanced inside. Unlike the rest of the house, Joey's old room still felt strangely alive. Messier. Warmer. There were books stacked unevenly on the shelves, an old leather jacket hanging near the wardrobe, faded vinyl records beside a vintage turntable, and framed photographs scattered carelessly across the dresser. One picture showed a younger Noah grinning beside Joey on a boat dock. Riley stared at it briefly. Tate noticed immediately. You can stop analyzing every photo now, Tate muttered. Riley looked back calmly. I'm trying to understand him. You won't understand Noah through Joey. Maybe not, Riley admitted, but Joey clearly mattered. Tate's eyes drifted briefly across the room. He did. The answer sounded reluctant. Complicated. Tate moved again before Riley could say anything else. This is the upstairs observatory. Riley blinked slightly. You have an observatory. Tate opened another door, revealing a circular room beneath a domed glass ceiling. An antique brass telescope sat pointed toward the dark sky outside. My grandfather was obsessed with astronomy. The room smelled faintly of cedarwood and old paper. "That's lovely," Riley said. "It's a beautiful astronomical lens." "Oh, please," Tate replied. "That's what my grandfather said it was for." Riley glanced at him. But he really liked spying on the neighbor's wife, 30 years younger than him, in her open shower through the window across the road. Her bedroom and bathroom were at the back of the next-door house, and he used the lens to watch her when she was naked without her knowledge while he jacked off while my grandmother was downstairs swapping recipes with my mother. Riley's expression fell. "Seriously?" Tate nodded. "Dead serious." He looked at the old instrument with a mixture of amusement and disbelief. Apparently, every generation of this family has had its own way of embarrassing the next one. Riley shook his head. "Your family history is unbelievable. You have no idea." Riley gulped. "My grandparents slept separately," Tate said, gesturing toward the old lens. "But if you turn it in the opposite direction, you can actually see the room where my grandmother used to change her clothes." Riley slowly looked at him. Tate nodded toward the telescope. "My grandfather was a voyeur. Apparently he liked watching people when they were undressed, including his own wife." Riley stared at him in disbelief. "Your family really needs to stop giving me surprises." Tate shrugged. "You're only halfway through the tour." Tate pointed toward a room far below them. "That's where my father Terrence had a secret sex dungeon where he held illicit orgies when my mother went shopping." Riley looked down the hallway. "A secret what room?" "None of the women in this family knew it was there. I did." "How?" "I found it when I was a little kid, crawling through the house looking for hidden passages." Riley stared at him. "You discovered it as a kid?" Tate nodded. "My grandfather had models out when nobody else was around. He kept that entire part of the house hidden from everyone." Riley looked increasingly uncomfortable. "And you knew all this?" "I knew there was something strange about that room," Tate said. "I just didn't understand what it was until I was older." He glanced toward the closed doorway. "Some family secrets are better left behind locked doors." Riley nodded slowly. "I'm beginning to understand why." Tate smirked. "Welcome to the Blue family." Beyond it sat another hallway leading toward the west wing. "The family theater's downstairs," Tate explained as they walked. "Wine cellar too, indoor spa room, gym, sauna." Riley looked amused. "How do people even use all this?" "They don't." Tate stopped outside another door. "My room." Riley hesitated slightly before entering. Unlike the rest of the mansion, Tate's bedroom looked modern and lived in. Dark green walls. Low lighting. A twin bed with green sheets. Books piled haphazardly across side tables. A record player beside floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the estate. Riley noticed something unusual about Tate's bedroom. It was the only bedroom in the house that didn't have blue walls or blue wallpaper. Every other bedroom seemed to follow the same color scheme, but Tate's room was covered in green wallpaper. "How come your bedroom has green wallpaper?" Riley asked. Tate glared at him. "It originally had blue wallpaper," Tate said. Riley looked around the room. "Then why did you change it?" Tate was quiet for a moment. "Noah slept in here too. We were 8 years old." That answer made Riley look at him again. "I spent the money and hired people to paint the room green so Noah would be comfortable." "Because he didn't like blue." "No." Tate's expression softened slightly. "Noah's favorite color is green, this shade actually." Riley glanced at the walls. "He told you that." "I knew." Tate said it simply, as though there were nothing remarkable about knowing something so small about another person. "He didn't mind the blue wallpaper," Tate continued. "He never complained about it. I just thought he would prefer his favorite color over plain blue wallpaper." Riley raised an eyebrow. "So you had an entire bedroom redecorated because you thought an 8-year-old boy might like it better?" Tate stared at him. "It was his 8th birthday present." Riley went silent. Tate looked around the room, his eyes lingering on the green walls. "It made him happy," he said quietly. "That was enough." The wallpaper had never been about Noah asking for something. Noah hadn't demanded the room be changed, he hadn't even minded the blue. Tate had simply known what Noah loved, had the means to give it to him, and had decided that if Noah was going to sleep in his room, then the room should feel like Noah belonged there, too. And apparently, even after all those years, Tate had never seen a reason to change it back. "I don't mean to pry," Riley said, "but my mother is an interior decorator. How much would it cost to change the wallpaper, the carpet, the color scheme, and the furnishings?" Tate lay back on the mattress and thought about it for a moment. "About $20,000. Riley blinked. "20,000. Tate smiled. "I used my trust fund to pay for it." Riley stared at him. "You spent $20,000 redecorating a bedroom for an 8-year-old. Tate shrugged. "Noah didn't have a bedroom in the trailer he was born in, so when he came here I wanted him to be happy." He looked around the room almost fondly. "If he were happy he would stay." Riley's expression changed. Tate said it as though the logic were perfectly obvious. "I didn't want him to feel like he was visiting, I wanted him to have a place that was his." He ran his eyes over the green walls. "So I gave him one." For Tate, the $20,000 had never been the important part. The important part was that Noah had smiled. And when Noah was happy, Tate believed there was a chance he would stay. "Why such a small bed?" Riley asked. "I would think you'd want a queen or a king-size bed." Tate looked down at the mattress he was sitting on. "I always liked a twin." That was the only explanation Tate offered for his choice of bed size. Riley looked at the bed again. The mattress might have been small, but the bedding was anything but ordinary. The duvet was luxurious, the sheets were exceptionally soft, and everything about the bed looked expensive. Riley ran his hand over the sheets. "These are expensive." Tate shrugged. Riley looked at him. "How expensive?" Tate glanced down at the bedding. "Probably $5,000. Riley stared at him. $5,000 sheets on a twin bed. "Noah likes comfortable sheets," Tate said simply. Riley could tell that everything in Tate and Noah's childhood bedroom had been chosen with comfort in mind. There wasn't a single thing in the room that wasn't ridiculously expensive or luxurious. The bedding, the duvet, the sheets, the furnishings, everything had been selected as though money had never been a consideration. Even the carpet matched the walls perfectly, a rich shade of green that complemented the wallpaper. Riley looked around the room again, taking it all in. "Do you mind if I sit?" Riley asked, gesturing toward the mattress. Tate immediately pointed toward a chair. "Sit there." Riley stopped. He looked at the chair, then at Tate. "The chair." "Yes." Riley slowly walked over and sat down. Tate remained on the bed. Riley couldn't help noticing the absurdity of it. Tate had spent a fortune making the room comfortable, yet when Riley asked to sit on the bed, Tate had redirected him to a chair without hesitation. It wasn't the expense that mattered. It was that the bed belonged to something Tate wasn't willing to share. Riley shook his head. Of course he did. There was something deeply personal about the room that immediately made Riley uncomfortable. Because Noah's presence lingered there too obviously. A hoodie draped across a chair. A tennis bracelet Riley recognized instantly was sitting near the lamp. Polaroids were pinned carelessly beside Tate's desk. Some included Noah. Tate noticed Riley noticing. Neither man spoke for a moment. Then Riley quietly asked, "He spends a lot of time in here?" Tate leaned against the doorway. "He used to." The answer settled heavily between them. Riley looked away first. Hanging above Tate's bed was a gigantic painting, larger than the bed itself. Riley stared at it. He recognized it immediately as the commissioned painting Tate had given Noah when Noah was 14. His eyes moved to the small plaque beneath the frame. "The boy I love." Riley looked back at the painting. A very young Noah was lying on his stomach across the bed, completely absorbed in a comic book, his feet lifted lazily into the air behind him. His blonde hair fell across his forehead, and there was something almost painfully innocent about the scene. It wasn't a formal portrait. It was Noah as Tate remembered him when he was happiest. Riley stared at the enormous painting. "That must have cost a fortune." Tate didn't answer. Riley moved closer. The frame alone was extraordinary. It was made of 24-karat gold and had been professionally welded into the wall. Why is the frame welded into the wall? So it won't fall during an earthquake. Riley looked at him. You actually thought of that? Of course. Then Riley noticed something else. There was a nearly invisible sheet of protective glass covering the entire painting. Is that glass? Yes. It's almost impossible to see. That was the point. Riley stared at the painting again. So nobody can steal it. Tate's expression became completely serious. So nobody can damage it. Riley looked from Tate to the painting. The room suddenly made more sense. The expensive bedding, the green wallpaper, the carpet, the furniture, the absurdly luxurious sheets. And now this. Tate hadn't simply decorated a bedroom. He had built a place around the memory of Noah and then protected every piece of it as though it were priceless. To Tate apparently it was. Tate guided him onward before the silence deepened. This is the attic staircase. They climbed another narrow set of stairs leading upward into the enormous attic, spanning nearly the entire house. The attic felt more like a forgotten museum than storage. Old trunks. Covered furniture. Christmas decorations. Thousands of video reels from family events. Portraits turned backward against the walls. Vintage toys. Boxes of handwritten letters are tied carefully with ribbon. Dust floated through thin beams of moonlight from the circular attic windows. Riley glanced around slowly. This place remembers everything. Tate looked strangely affected by that sentence. Yeah, he muttered quietly, that's kind of the problem. They descended again toward the main floor. Tate showed him the formal dining room next, a cavernous space with a table long enough to seat 30 people beneath glittering crystal chandeliers. Then the breakfast solarium. The ballroom nobody used anymore. The downstairs study has hidden liquor cabinets behind the bookshelves. The indoor conservatory is filled with tropical plants. The game room with billiards tables and vintage arcade machines, which Joey had insisted on installing years earlier. By the time they reached the back portico, Riley looked genuinely overwhelmed. Tate pushed open the enormous glass doors leading outside. The estate grounds stretched endlessly beneath soft evening lights. Stone pathways curved through manicured gardens and sculpted hedges. There's the pool guest house, Tate said, pointing toward a smaller guest structure beside the massive swimming pool. The pool itself looked resort-sized, glowing turquoise beneath underwater lights. A waterfall spilled down artificial rock formations into the deep end, while lounge chairs lined the surrounding patio. Beyond that sat an outdoor kitchen complete with brick pizza ovens, grills, fireplaces, and a covered dining pavilion. Raleigh stared, this is insane. Tate barely reacted. Farther beyond the pool stretched the tennis court Noah loved. Bright overhead lamps illuminated the pristine blue surface even at night. Noah used to drag me out there constantly, Tate said quietly. Riley glanced sideways at him, you sound fond of that memory. Tate ignored the observation. Past the tennis court sat a private greenhouse, koi ponds, marble statues, and winding garden trails disappearing into the trees. There was even a detached glass guest house near the back of the property. Boat docks farther down the hill, Tate added, and there's a stable behind the east gardens. Riley laughed softly in disbelief. Your family owns a small country. Pretty much. They stepped onto the elevated patio balcony, overlooking everything. From here, the mansion looked almost unreal behind them, enormous columns, ivy-covered stone walls, glowing windows stretching endlessly into the night. Riley rested his hands lightly against the railing. Then quietly, no one never talks about how rich you all are. Tate shrugged, because no one never cared about that part. Riley nodded slowly. That's true. Silence settled again. Then Tate looked out toward the tennis court, voice lower now. You know what the scary thing about Noah is? Riley glanced at him carefully. What? Tate's eyes stayed fixed on the dark estate grounds. He can make a place feel like home without even trying. Here's the main garage, Tate said, flipping on the light switch. The enormous space slowly came into view. We have 17 garages, Tate explained. My grandfather owned more than 200 vintage, rare, and ridiculously expensive cars, most of them built before 1965. Riley looked around in disbelief. 200. More than 200. Tate pointed toward one of the vehicles. This one is Uncle Joey's red pickup, he left it to me in his will. Riley walked closer, looking at the truck. You still drive it? Sometimes. Tate ran a hand along the side of the vehicle. I take it out when I want to remember the bastard. Riley smiled faintly. You miss him. Tate's expression changed for just a moment. Yeah, he died in 1993, 3 years ago. He looked at the truck again. More than I usually admit. It's beautiful, Riley said, leaning forward to touch the truck. Don't touch it, Tate said immediately. Riley pulled his hand back. Nobody touches this car, Tate snapped. Sorry, what's the make and model? Tate glanced at the red pickup. Joey's car was a 1965 Chevrolet C10 Fleetside, C1434. Riley looked at it again, this time keeping his hands firmly to himself. Now I understand why you're protective of it. Tate nodded. It belonged to Joey, that makes it different. Riley watched as Tate lovingly ran his left hand along the top of the red pickup, his fingers brushing gently over the metal above the engine. It's priceless, Tate said, and it's mine, you don't get to touch it. Riley immediately pulled his hand back. Tate retrieved a blue tarp and carefully draped it over the truck, covering the entire vehicle. This car is worth $150,000 and it's insured. Several big celebrities sat in this car, that's why it's worth so much. My uncle knew a lot of politicians, celebrities, singers, royalty, and extremely well-known people. Anyone, including my mother, who touches it without permission will be arrested. Riley raised an eyebrow. You're serious? Completely. Tate gave one of the tires a light kick before turning toward the exit. Come on. He led Riley out of the garage, leaving the red pickup safely covered behind them. On the way back indoors from the patio balcony, Riley slowed near the third-floor hallway when he noticed a narrow door partially tucked behind an alcove. This room, Riley asked curiously. Tate barely glanced over, small bathroom. Riley pushed the door open anyway. It was oddly charming compared to the rest of the mansion, smaller, older, lined with pale green tile and brass fixtures that looked untouched since the 70s. A clawfoot tub sat beneath a circular stained glass window, while an antique chandelier cast warm light across the marble sink, and a frameless fixed glass walk-in shower was to the left of the tub between the sink and the door. This is cute, Riley admitted with a faint smile as he stepped inside and flicked on the light. Tate stayed outside the doorway. Arms crossed. Rigid. Riley noticed after a second, are you coming in? No, I'm fine out here. Okay, Riley laughed softly, weird little room to avoid. He turned one of the shower handles experimentally. A sudden blast of water exploded from the oversized rainfall showerhead overhead. Riley jumped slightly, Jesus. Tate visibly stiffened outside the door. They've got a sick showerhead in here, Riley called casually. Are you giving me a house tour or trying to sell me the place? No response. Riley frowned faintly and stepped back toward the doorway. Tate. Tate was breathing unevenly. Not dramatically, but enough for Riley to notice. His face looked pale beneath the hallway lighting. You okay? I'm fine. You don't look fine. Tate rubbed aggressively at his chest once, like he was trying to physically calm himself down. Can we just go downstairs now? Riley stared at him more carefully now. You really don't look good. It's all the staircases in this fucking house. Tate. I said I'm fine. Riley nodded. There's no toilet in this bathroom, Riley said, looking around. Don't you find that a little weird? Tate growled. There's a very expensive bathtub taking up half the damn room, that's why there isn't a toilet. I'm sure you could have figured that out. Riley raised an eyebrow. Tate continued. The owners we bought the house from in 1972 had to remove the toilet while they were doing some restoration work. When they finished, there simply wasn't enough space to put it back. He stepped into the hallway. I don't use this bathroom anymore. Riley followed him. Why not? I prefer the fourth floor, it's warmer up there. Tate glanced back toward the bathroom. This bathroom on the third floor is a death trap. Riley looked at the bathroom again. Because there's no toilet. No, because everything in this house is designed to kill you eventually. The tiles on the floor get extremely slippery when they get wet, and after I almost slipped one time getting out of the shower, I just go upstairs where the glass tiles aren't on the upper level's floor. Riley stared at him. Tate continued down the hallway. Then more carefully. Do you have a problem with me? Tate laughed once under his breath. Cold. Sarcastic. Why would you think that? Riley crossed his arms loosely. Maybe because you've looked at me like you want me removed from the property since I arrived. Tate's jaw tightened immediately. Then, without another word, he turned and walked down the hallway. Riley followed. Tate. Tate walked up to the fourth floor, then pushed open a heavy wooden door near the end of the corridor and stepped inside. Riley stopped in the doorway. The room was clearly older than the rest of the house. Dark wood paneling. Floor-to-ceiling shelves. A massive antique desk faces tall windows overlooking the estate grounds. Leather chairs. Crystal decanters. Old family portraits. This was my father's main study. He had 3, Tate said quietly. Riley entered cautiously. Tate moved behind the enormous desk almost instinctively, like stepping into inherited authority. Then he looked up sharply. Shut the door. Riley hesitated. Then complied. The latch clicked softly behind him. Tate folded his hands together on the desk, expression unreadable now. We need to discuss a few things. Riley frowned. Like what? Tate leaned back slowly in the chair. First, he said coolly, Riley, you can call me Mr. Blue. Riley blinked once. My friends call me Tate and we're not friends. The implication hung heavily in the room. Riley studied him carefully. I didn't realize we were establishing titles now. In this house, Tate replied calmly, respect matters. Riley gave a small nod. All right, Mr. Blue. Tate's eyes narrowed slightly, as if he was testing whether Riley sounded mocking. The issue, Tate continued, is that you're engaged to Noah. Yes. And yet somehow nobody thought it appropriate to speak to me beforehand. Riley blinked once. I'm sorry. Tate's voice sharpened. I'm the acting patriarch of this household, the head of the Blue family. Riley stared at him carefully now. The entire Blue family falls under my supervision, guidance, and legal oversight, Tate continued. And even though Noah isn't officially or legally a Blue, his jaw flexed slightly, he's still attached to this family socially and financially. Riley looked genuinely confused now. Mr. Blue. I find it rude, Tate interrupted coldly, that you didn't ask my permission before dating him or before proposing. Riley stared for 2 full seconds. Then, shouldn't you be mad at Noah? Tate frowned immediately. What? He's the one who proposed and asked my permission to date me. Silence. Tate slowly straightened behind the desk. He what? Riley blinked. I thought you knew. Tate stared at him. Noah proposed to me, Riley repeated carefully, not the other way around. Tate's face darkened in real time. The information physically offended him. You're lying. Why would I lie about that? Tate stood abruptly from behind the desk, hard enough that the chair rolled backward across the floor. Noah proposed to you. Yes. The room went completely still. Tate stared at Riley as he'd just been physically struck. Tate laughed once. Short. Disbelieving. He asked you. Yes. Tate turned away sharply, packing once toward the windows. Something about this clearly disturbed him far more than Riley expected. He never told me that, Tate muttered. Riley frowned slightly. Why would he? Tate ignored the question completely. You accepted immediately. Riley looked caught off guard by the intensity in the question. I mean, yes. Tate scoffed quietly to himself. Of course he had. Why wouldn't he? Riley got handed the version of Noah who desperately wanted stability. The version that got tired of emotional chaos and reached for permanence like a lifeline. And Noah had done it last night. While Tate was still standing here, believing there was time left to stop this. Tate turned back sharply. You still should have spoken to me. Mr. Blue, Riley said carefully, with respect. I don't think Noah needs anybody's permission to get engaged. In this family, things are more complicated than that. No, Riley replied evenly, I think you want them to be more complicated than that. Tate's eyes narrowed. You don't marry into families like this casually. Riley almost laughed, families like this. Yes, Tate gestured around the massive study. There are generations of expectations attached to this name, legal concerns, social obligations, financial ramifications. Riley looked increasingly unimpressed. You think this is about money? It's about suitability. The word hung sharply in the room. Riley stared at him for a moment before speaking carefully. You don't think I'm good enough for Noah? Tate didn't answer immediately. Which answered enough. Just because you have money, Tate said quietly, doesn't mean you understand what becoming attached to this family actually means. Riley folded his arms, and what exactly does it mean? It means permanence. Riley frowned, most people call that marriage. No, Tate shook his head sharply. You don't understand, people in this family don't leave each other, everything becomes interconnected permanently. Reputation, business, property, public image. Riley stared at him. Then quietly. You're trying very hard to make this sound official when really you're just angry Noah chose me. The sentence sliced directly through him. Tate's expression hardened instantly. You think this is jealousy? I think you're furious that Noah proposed to someone who isn't you. Silence. Tate looked genuinely dangerous for a second. Then he laughed. Low and humorless. Tate tried to explain. In Uncle Joey's will, he included a condition for Noah and the friends who receive a monthly stipend of $10,000. They can't marry without the consent of the leader of the Blue family. Riley's expression changed. If they marry without that consent, they forfeit the money, any inheritance, and any financial assistance from the family in the future. Tate looked directly at him. So if you wish to marry Noah, understand what that means. Riley frowned. What does it mean? He'll lose his inheritance, he won't receive the monthly stipend anymore, and he won't be my beneficiary. Riley stared at him. Tate's voice became colder. You'll be supporting him. Riley looked genuinely stunned. You're telling me that if I marry Noah, he loses everything his family left him. I'm telling you that those are the conditions of the will. Riley shook his head. That doesn't sound like a choice. Tate's expression hardened. So how do I go about getting the head of this family to consent to our marriage? Riley asked. I mean you. Tate glared at him from across his desk. There isn't one. Riley frowned. There isn't one what? There isn't one way to get me to consent. Riley sighed. Tate, I don't want. That's Mr. Blue, Tate interrupted. Riley stopped. Tate leaned back in his chair, his expression completely unmoved. Until you understand that you're speaking to the head of the Blue family, you're not getting anywhere. Mr. Blue, Riley corrected himself, clearly irritated. I don't want your permission because I want to marry Noah. I want it because your family's rules apparently make you the person standing between us and his inheritance. Tate's eyes narrowed. And I'm asking what I have to do. Nothing. Riley stared at him. Nothing. You heard me. Tate folded his hands on the desk. I don't like you, Riley. I didn't like you when I met you, and I haven't changed my opinion since. Riley sighed. So I'm supposed to convince you to like me? No. Then what am I supposed to do? Tate's expression remained cold. Live with the fact that I don't like you. Riley shook his head. You're impossible. No, Tate said calmly, I'm the patriarch. Riley stared at him for a long moment. Those aren't necessarily the same thing. For the first time, Tate's expression flickered. Riley had clearly touched a nerve. I will never consent to an arrangement or a marriage that takes Noah out of my life or removes my access to him. Riley stared at Tate. Tate leaned back in his chair, completely serious. I have a routine. I like my routine. I like knowing where Noah is when he's around and when I can expect to see him. Riley frowned. And how exactly is that supposed to work if Noah marries me? That's what I'm asking you. You're asking me. Yes. Tate gestured toward him. How is your presence in Noah's life not going to interfere with my sleep schedule? Riley blinked. Your sleep schedule. Yes, are you volunteering to sleep on the couch? Riley stared at him in disbelief. No. The spare room. No. Then where? In my own house with my fiancée. Tate's expression darkened. That wasn't one of the options. Riley shook his head. You realize Noah would be my husband, right? Tate's jaw tightened. And he'd still be Noah. Riley looked at him for several seconds. That may be the strangest argument I've ever heard. Tate shrugged. You're asking me to approve a marriage that changes my entire routine. I'm allowed to have concerns. Your concern is where you're going to sleep. My concern is whether I'm going to wake up one morning and discover Noah has permanently moved into your bedroom. Riley folded his arms. That is generally what happens when people get married. Tate glared at him. Then we're going to have a problem. Riley stared at Tate as though he genuinely couldn't understand what he was talking about. I don't understand, Riley said. How does marrying Noah and living downtown less than 10 minutes away remove your access to him? Tate said nothing. You'll still see him every day if you want to. It's a short walk from here. I'm not hiding him from you. I'm not isolating him. I'm not making him choose between his family and his friends. Riley leaned forward. You're not losing access to Noah. Tate stared back at him as though Riley had completely missed the point. I have a sleeping arrangement. Riley blinked. And your presence would make it awkward. Riley frowned. Where do you sleep? Tate answered without hesitation. On top of Noah. Silence. Riley stared at him. Tate stared back. Riley slowly leaned away from the desk. You sleep on top of Noah? Yes. Every night. Usually. Riley looked at Tate as though he had just discovered that the man had lost his mind. Tate Noah is an adult. I know. And he's my fiancé. I know. And you just told me you sleep on top of him. Tate nodded. Now you're beginning to understand the problem. Riley rubbed his forehead. No, I really don't think I am. If you don't mind me asking, Riley said, visibly trying not to get angry with Tate, where did you sleep last night? Tate smiled as though he were incredibly proud of himself. On top of Noah. Riley went completely silent. Tate had absolutely no shame about it. Riley stared at him, apparently trying to figure out how to respond without losing his temper. So, Tate continued, if you do get married, how is that going to impact my sleep schedule? Riley blinked. I sleep best when I have a nice blonde-haired mattress under my body at night, Tate said matter-of-factly, and you being in bed with us would just make things weird. Riley stared at him. Oh. He paused. So let me understand this. Tate waited. Me being in bed with my husband would be a problem. Yes. Riley pointed toward Tate. You're a strange man lying on top of my husband. Yes. And you're saying I'm the weird part of this situation. Tate nodded. Exactly. Riley stared at him in complete disbelief. Tate, I don't think you understand how any of this works. Tate leaned back in his chair. I understand perfectly. No, Riley said, I really don't think you do. Riley didn't know what to say. So how am I supposed to sleep with my husband at night while there's a third person in bed, he asked. Tate shook his head. You wouldn't be in bed with us, you'd be somewhere else. Riley stared at him. Of course, I realize that you and Noah will have your private time and all of that, Tate continued. But when Noah's done with you, he comes to sleep with me at 9 o'clock. Riley looked at Tate. Wait, 9 o'clock. Tate nodded. You want my fiancé to leave my bed and go sleep with you at 9 o'clock. Tate nodded again. You can have him any time before 9, Tate said calmly, but I get him after 9. Riley stared at him. After 9. 9 o'clock on the dot. Riley couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had never seen a 28-year-old, wealthy CEO become so completely territorial about a sleeping arrangement. You actually have a bedtime schedule for my fiancé. Tate looked at him as though Riley was the one being unreasonable. It isn't a schedule. Then what is it? A rule. Riley just stared at him. Tate didn't seem remotely embarrassed. "You can have Noah during the day," he said. "I'm not stopping you, but after 9 he's mine." Riley slowly shook his head. 28 years old. A wealthy CEO. And apparently when it came to sleeping arrangements, Tate had the territorial instincts of an 8-year-old guarding his favorite bedroom. "Do you wear clothes to bed?" Riley asked. Tate narrowed his eyes. "That's none of your business." Riley kept looking at him. "I'm his fiancé, I think I have a right to ask." Tate shook his head. "It's my business." Riley stared at him. Tate didn't look away. "I'm willing to share," he said calmly, "but I'm the priority." Riley blinked. There was no embarrassment in Tate's voice, no hesitation. He said it with the same certainty he used when discussing business, as though the matter had already been settled long ago. Riley slowly shook his head. He was beginning to understand that with Tate, the word share apparently came with very specific terms and conditions. "What if I don't want a sleeping arrangement schedule?" Riley asked. Tate looked at him. "What if I want all of Noah's time at night?" Riley continued. "You can get your own girlfriend or go home to your wife." Riley watched Tate carefully. He was trying to make him jealous. Then he added almost casually, "Noah is my sleep partner, he's very toasty and I kind of like spooning him." Tate's expression changed instantly. His face contorted into an enraged scowl. Riley almost smiled. He hadn't expected Tate to react that strongly. In fact, Riley never would have guessed that Tate Blue, the wealthiest man in California, a powerful CEO who could negotiate billion-dollar deals without blinking, could be jealous over something as simple as a blonde man sleeping beside his childhood buddy. But there it was. Tate was jealous. And Riley had just discovered exactly where Tate's patience ended. Apparently it ended at 9 o'clock in a bed with Noah in someone else's arms. Riley stared at Tate with an expression that suggested he had somehow wandered into the twilight zone. "If you're sticking your nose into my relationship with my fiancé, maybe I'm not marrying Noah then." Tate frowned. "What?" "I'm not marrying a man if he's expected to spend his nights with you." Riley's voice rose. "He's not going to sleep with another man every night while he's married to me. Are you crazy?" Tate's expression hardened. "Watch how you talk to me." "No, you watch what you're asking." Riley took a breath, trying to control his anger. "Did your wife agree to this arrangement when she married you?" Tate's face changed. He shook his head. "No." Riley waited. "I wasn't sleeping with Noah during that time," Tate said quietly. Riley stared at him. "Then why are you expecting me to accept something you weren't even doing while you were married?" Tate didn't answer. For once he seemed to realize that Riley had a point. Tate shook his head. "That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying Noah and I would have that kind of arrangement. I'm explaining why I'm not giving my consent to this marriage." Riley frowned. "I am not going to have some third party involved in my relationship with Noah." Tate's expression hardened. "I don't share." Riley stared at him. "I never would have guessed." The sarcasm was unmistakable. "What kind of arrangement did you have with Noah before last night?" Riley asked. Tate hesitated. "It was platonic." Riley raised an eyebrow. "Platonic?" "Yes." Tate looked away for a moment. "I'm afraid of the dark. Noah helps me sleep." Riley stared at him. "And that's all it was?" "Before last night." Tate's expression changed. "After last night things are different." Riley folded his arms. "How different?" Tate looked directly at him. "I intend to pursue a regular, satisfying sexual romantic relationship with Noah now." Riley's jaw tightened. "And that's why you're refusing to consent to my marriage to him?" "Exactly." Tate leaned back in his chair. "It doesn't work in my favor," Tate said, stroking his clothed dick. Riley stared at him. Why would someone willingly give their lover permission to marry someone else? Riley let out a disbelieving laugh. "You're not asking me to understand your family rules, Tate. You're asking me to accept that you believe you have a claim on Noah simply because you've decided you want him." Tate's eyes narrowed. "I've known Noah my entire life." "And Noah proposed," Riley countered. That silenced Tate for a moment before he explained his plans. I plan on having regular sex with Noah for as long as I see fit, and if the blonde desires me, Tate stated, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. His hand moved to adjust himself, fingers wrapping around the thick outline of his cock through his pants. The pressure felt good, necessary, as he continued speaking to the man sitting across from him. He satisfies me, and I'm rather fond of him. I plan on giving money to Noah and his friends as long as they want it, and I'm not basing my distribution of money on whether or not Noah has sex with me. I'm not blackmailing him, and I'm not forcing him either. My arrangement with Noah has nothing to do with money or any reason besides that we like each other. Riley's face had gone pale, his hands gripping the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles showed white. The engagement ring on his finger seemed to mock him as Tate's words sank in, each syllable driving home the reality of what had happened between his fiancée and this man. Tate's fingers continued their slow, deliberate stroking along the length of his cock, the motion visible through the fabric of his pants. The friction sent small sparks of pleasure up his spine, and he made no effort to hide his arousal from the man whose world he was systematically dismantling. All this talk about the blonde rascal is making me hard, Tate admitted with a low chuckle, his hand pressing more firmly against his erection. Photographs of Tate scattered across his desk caught his attention, dozens of images of Noah on various vacations, some taken during their family trips, others capturing the way his smile and funny poses lit up a room. Tate gathered them up methodically, stacking them face down so their subject wouldn't be staring back at them during this conversation. I like having sex with Noah, Tate continued, his voice dropping to a more intimate register. I had 9 rounds with him last night. Riley flinched visibly, his entire body jerking as if struck. The mental image of his fiancée bent over, spread open, taking another man's cock repeatedly was clearly tearing him apart. Tate watched the reaction with satisfaction, his hand never stopping its slow caress of his own dick through his pants. Of course, I didn't know he was engaged when I fucked him, Tate continued, though the lie was transparent. But honestly, it doesn't matter, I actually fucked him a few times upstairs while you were having brunch. The color drained completely from Riley's face. Tate could see the man's mind working, imagining the scene, his fiancée upstairs, legs spread wide, taking Tate's cock while Riley sat downstairs making polite conversation with strangers. The thought clearly devastated him, and Tate felt his own cock harden further at the visible evidence of Riley's pain. Riley's eyes were fixed on Tate's obvious erection, unable to look away from the evidence of what had been inside his fiancée. You really have no idea what you walked into. Riley held his ground, then explain it. Tate stepped slowly around the desk. You want honesty? He asked quietly. Yes. I think Noah proposed to you because he's scared. Riley's face tightened immediately, but Tate continued. And I think you said yes because you mistake being needed for being loved. That's not fair. Neither is pretending Noah's emotionally uncomplicated. He's human. He's vulnerable. So are you. That answer stopped Tate cold for half a second. Riley noticed immediately. You keep talking about Noah like everybody's trying to take advantage of him, Riley continued quietly. But honestly, I think you're terrified somebody might love him in a way that doesn't revolve around emotional dependency. Tate's jaw flexed. You think I depend on Noah? I think you built your entire emotional life around him. The silence afterward was brutal. Then Tate said quietly, You're not marrying him. Riley stared at him. Excuse me. You heard me. You don't get to decide that. Tate stepped closer. The old study suddenly felt suffocatingly tense. I will do everything in my power, Tate said softly, to stop Noah from making decisions that destroy him. Riley held his gaze. You mean decisions that don't include you? And for the first time all night. Tate had no immediate response. 30 full seconds of silence followed Riley's statement. You mean decisions that don't include you? Tate stood motionless near the desk, jaw tight, eyes fixed somewhere past Riley like he was trying to regain control over a conversation that had slipped away from him. Then slowly Tate exhaled. Tate leaned forward. I'm not going to control Noah's life nor violate the blonde's autonomy or agency. I'm not going to forbid him from doing anything. I'm not going to manipulate and control him like I'm some jealous boyfriend trying to isolate him from his friends and family. I'm not a monster. Riley wasn't so sure. He kept staring at Tate. I have nothing against Noah having platonic friends. I don't mind when he dates people, as long as they don't interfere with my sleep schedule and I remain his priority. He can do whatever he pleases with whomever he likes, as long as the people he's with aren't criminals or trying to abuse him to get to me through Noah. Tate paused. I do background checks on everyone who's around Noah. Noah thinks with his heart before his brain sometimes, but don't misunderstand me, he's very intelligent. He graduated at the top of his class at Brown University. Noah is just too sentimental about decisions that should be made wisely and with life experience. When he likes someone, sometimes his heart runs away with his head. His expression hardened slightly. That's why I have to be the voice of reason, the big bad wolf who asks the questions nobody else wants to ask. Somebody has to make sure Noah doesn't let his feelings blind him to what's right in front of him. Riley nodded. Tate continued, I never keep these things from Noah. He knows I'm protective of him. He knows I take steps to make sure the people around him are safe. He leaned back, his expression becoming more serious. Noah was very sheltered as a child. He grew up believing most people were fundamentally decent, and he still carries that belief with him. He's not familiar with how affluent circles can nefariously work behind closed doors. He doesn't understand things like grooming, yacht parties, freak-offs, sugar daddies, or the ways wealthy, powerful men can take advantage of someone who doesn't know what to look for. Tate's jaw tightened. If you know what I mean. Riley said nothing. Noah has never had to experience the worst of it firsthand, except for Derek. Tate's voice hardened at the name. My ex-brother-in-law made me regret allowing a criminal into my parents' house. Noah is naive, smaller built, and a sweet young man who trusts people too easily. He paused. So yes, I pay attention, I ask questions, I look into people, not because I think Noah is stupid and not because I think I own him. I do it because I know there are people in this world who see someone like Noah as an opportunity. Tate looked directly at Riley. And I refuse to let someone hurt him simply because Noah was never taught to recognize the danger. Every one of Noah's friends, every business contact, anyone he spends time with more than once, I have a conversation with them. I warn them to their face that if they try to groom, abuse, manipulate, or profit off Noah in a nefarious, egregious way, they'll meet a side of Tate Blue they never want to see again. Riley's expression tightened. I make it very clear whether they're good or bad that if anything happens to Noah, they'll wish they'd never met him or been birthed by their mother. Tate's voice remained almost conversational. I'm the wealthiest man in California, Riley. I can make someone's trust fund disappear. I can make investors stop returning their calls. I can make their name toxic in every room that matters. He paused, letting the words settle. And if someone decides to hurt Noah, I can make sure the people who once welcomed them into their world suddenly have no idea who they are. Riley stared at him. Tate shrugged. I don't have to threaten anyone, I don't have to lay a finger on them. Money, reputation, connections, those things have consequences all by themselves. His expression hardened. All I have to do is make one accusation that people believe and doors start closing, friends stop answering calls, business partners suddenly become unavailable. Nobody wants to be the person standing beside the man everyone else has decided is dangerous. Tate leaned back. So when I tell people to treat Noah with respect, they understand me. Riley exhaled slowly. That's supposed to make me feel better. No, Tate said calmly. It's supposed to make you understand how seriously I take him. Riley flinched. Riley gulped. Tate noticed. Then he said something that made Riley wish he hadn't. You see, Riley, my ancestors were very particular about protecting this family. My great-great-grandfather has been dead for at least 60 years, but there are stories about him that people in my family still talk about. Tate paused. He once discovered that one of his employees was trying to seduce his eldest daughter to steal her fortune and humiliate his family. Do you know what happened? Riley slowly shook his head. He beat the man to death with a shovel and buried his body somewhere. Riley flinched. The killer never spent a day in prison. Why? Riley asked, though he already knew he probably didn't want to hear the answer. Tate smiled without humor. Because my ancestors owned the police. Silence settled between them. I'm a nice guy, Riley. Riley stared at him. Tate raised an eyebrow. Well, my friends would never agree with that statement. He leaned back. I have a patience level of tolerance. I allow people to make honest mistakes, innocent mistakes, mistakes that don't embarrass me in front of my clients or my family. His expression hardened. But I'm not my great-great-grandfather. I'm not a murderer. Tate let the silence stretch. There are many ways to bury someone without breaking the law. Riley's throat went dry. Tate looked him directly in the eyes. So don't make me regret letting you breathe around Noah. I understand, Riley said in a shaky voice. He swallowed. I said I understand. Sit well, we understand each other. Tate looked at Riley. Are you fond of your kneecaps? Riley had no idea what to say. I'd say yes. Tate nodded and looked back at him. Then treat Noah like the adored and respected prince he is, Tate said, and never make that blonde cry. Riley stared at him. Tate's expression remained completely serious. Do that, he continued, and your kneecaps have nothing to worry about. Riley blinked. So just to be clear, he said slowly, your entire threat is conditional. Tate nodded. Very. Riley looked toward Noah, then back at Tate. And if I treat him well? Then we have no problems. Riley nodded thoughtfully. That's probably the strangest relationship advice I've ever received. Tate shrugged. It's good advice. Riley couldn't argue with that. Tate watched him silently. My brother-in-law Derek tried something with Noah while my buddy was sleeping upstairs in his warm, snug little bed. Riley's brow furrowed. And by tried something, Tate continued evenly, I mean attempted sexual assault. Riley visibly flinched at the bluntness of the word. His stomach tightened, and for a moment he couldn't bring himself to look directly at Tate. Tate noticed. Do you know what happened to the little whippersnapper? Riley slowly shook his head. I beat his face in with my fist, then I threw his perversion of a body out the window. He lost 6 teeth. I broke his palate. He had to have some reconstructive surgery done on his face. His neck was later put in a brace, and he broke several bones after hitting the rose bushes out back, breaking his fall, but he learned his lesson. Riley's eyes widened. He survived barely, Tate added, because I allowed him to. Riley stared at him stunned. I didn't want his sister grieving over the lifeless body of her piece of shit brother. Besides, I wouldn't have gone to prison either way. Tate's mouth curved into a faint smile. I have a sense of humor. Riley didn't smile. Which is why anyone who has ever tried something with Noah that the blonde didn't want to experience is no longer in business. Tate's voice remained remarkably calm. They aren't welcome at any corporate office or conglomerate affiliated with me, and if they're on unfriendly terms with me, that's even worse. Riley shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I know several men who tried something with Noah over the years. They're still collecting unemployment 10 years later because nobody wants to touch them with a 5-inch pole. Riley's mouth went dry. Tate leaned forward. So, you'd better think very carefully about your motives and what you want out of this relationship with Noah. Riley nodded quickly. And you better make damn sure your intentions are as clean as a saint's halo. Tate held his gaze. Because if they're not, watch your back. Riley's breathing became shallow. Tate sat back completely composed. And don't think this is a threat. Riley swallowed. This is an agreement. Tate stood and walked toward the closet. Riley watched him confused. Tate opened the door, reached inside and pulled out a shovel. Not an ordinary shovel. It was made of 24-karat gold. Riley stared at it. Tate carried it back to the desk, set it down carefully and rested one hand on the handle. This, Tate said, is a symbol. Riley looked from the shovel to Tate. A symbol of what happens when people infuriate me. Riley swallowed. And before you misunderstand me, I know Noah cares about you. Whatever feelings he has for you, I'll take them into consideration. Tate sat on the edge of the desk. But if you ever try to ruin his life, I'll make damn sure you understand what it feels like when someone else starts running yours. Riley's shoulders stiffened. Tate pointed toward the shovel displayed on the wall. This is the actual shovel my great-great-grandfather used on that slimy little man who tried to steal my ancestor's daughter's fortune. Riley stared at it. Tate continued as though he were giving a perfectly ordinary history lesson. It's a rare commodity, priceless really. Riley stepped closer. You see that little dent right there? He pointed toward a small indentation in the metal. That's where it connected with the guy's head. Riley slowly looked at Tate. You're telling me this is an actual family heirloom? Yes. A shovel. A historically significant shovel. Riley looked back at the dent. I suddenly understand why you keep it behind glass. Tate nodded. Exactly. Riley wasn't sure what concerned him more, the fact that Tate's family apparently preserved a weapon as an heirloom, or the fact that Tate seemed genuinely proud of it. So, Tate continued, tapping one finger against the golden handle, you can talk through the shovel. Riley blinked, talk through the shovel. It's a symbol of gentlemanly behavior. Riley stared at him, clearly wondering whether Tate was joking. Tate wasn't smiling. And I have a photographic memory, whatever you tell me I'll remember. He leaned forward. So, when I eventually discover what you're really up to, I'll remember every word you said to me today. Riley shifted in his seat. Tate's eyes never left him. So Riley. He gestured toward the chair. What are your intentions with Noah? He asked me to marry him, Riley said. Tate's expression didn't change. We want to make a life together, Riley continued. I can support Noah, I have my own PR and entertainment firm, it's doing well. Last year it brought in about $500,000 after taxes and overhead. Riley glanced briefly at the golden shovel before looking back at Tate. I can keep Noah in the lifestyle he's accustomed to. Tate's eyebrow lifted. Noah told me he has about $80 million, Riley added. I don't care about that. Tate studied him. Money is important, Riley said carefully. I'm not going to pretend it isn't, but it shouldn't be the reason I'm with him. He took a breath. I want Noah, I want a life with him. I want to marry him because I love him, not because of what's in his bank account. Riley's voice steadied. If Noah had 80,000 instead of 80 million, I'd still want him. If he had nothing, I'd still want him. Tate remained silent for several seconds. Then his gaze dropped briefly to the 24-karat gold shovel. Riley followed his eyes. Is that a good sign? Riley asked nervously. Tate looked back at him. I haven't decided yet. What's the shovel for? Riley asked. It's a symbol of keeping our conversations honest and what happens when one of us doesn't live up to what they promised, Tate said. Riley looked at the 24-karat gold shovel. Tate continued, you see, my ancestors believed that a man's word was who the man was, and if you couldn't trust a man around the people you loved, then you dealt with him accordingly. He paused. Some of them believed you should shoot a man like a horse if you couldn't trust him around your womenfolk. Riley's face tightened. I'm more civilized than my ancestors. That's reassuring, Riley muttered. Tate ignored him. But I've heard the stories. I know of at least 15 people my ancestors killed because those strangers simply couldn't keep their fingers off the teenage girl blue members. Riley shifted in his chair. Tate sighed. I'm a human being, Riley, a civilized one. I don't resort to violence. Riley's eyes drifted toward the shovel again. Tate noticed. If you think I'm terrifying, you should have met my grandfather. Riley looked back at him. One of his friend's sons tried to marry my female cousin. My grandfather told him to get off the property. What happened? Riley asked cautiously. He gave him a head start while he loaded his gun. Riley blinked. The man got shot in one of his kneecaps, but he got away, Tate said, luckily for him. Tate leaned back. And lucky for you. Riley swallowed. I'm not my grandfather. I'm not my ancestors who saw unsuitable potential suitors or fiancés of family members as a thief or a fornicator who's tainting the blood and honor of the Blue Dynasty. Tate's expression became serious. I hope for your health and future you have good intentions toward Noah. His gaze settled firmly on Riley. Because if you don't. Tate glanced at the golden shovel. Who knows what will happen to your body? Tate smiled an evil grin similar to the Joker when he thinks about killing Batman. Tate redirected the conversation. So you want to marry Noah and take him away from me? Riley immediately shook his head. No, you'll have access to him at any time of the day. He can come over here whenever he wants. He can go wherever he wants. He can talk to anyone he wants. Riley tried to clarify, his voice still shaking. I would never keep him from you, not during the day, not at night. If Noah wants to see you, I will never stop him. Tate stared at him, looking distinctly unimpressed. But if he sleeps with you at night, Tate said, what's going to happen to me? Riley blinked. Tate's expression remained completely serious. I can't sleep without him there. Riley opened his mouth, but Tate continued. Do you expect me to just stop sleeping? Am I supposed to spend every night cold while lying awake because you decided Noah belongs in your bed instead of mine? That's not what Because you keep saying you won't keep Noah from me, Tate interrupted. But what happens when having him means keeping him somewhere else overnight? Riley stared at him. Tate leaned back, his jaw tight. I've spent years sleeping with Noah beside me. I wake up and he's there. I know where he is. I know he's safe. And now you're asking me to accept that someone else gets to decide when I see him? I'm not trying to decide anything for him, Riley said quietly. Tate looked at him. Then remember that. Riley nodded. I might approve this marriage, Tate said. Riley blinked. Tate held up a hand. As long as I have access to Noah 24/7 and I get to have sex with him, those are my terms. Riley's mouth fell open. For several seconds he couldn't think of a single response. He felt like he was sitting across from his partner's mistress while she calmly explained the boundaries and rules of their relationship, and somehow Tate was the one negotiating them. Riley finally managed, those are your terms. Yes. You're seriously negotiating my marriage like you're the third person in it. Tate looked completely unbothered. I'm negotiating my relationship with Noah. Riley stared at him. That distinction isn't making me feel any better. Tate leaned back. It wasn't supposed to. I'll have to do a background check on you, Tate said. Riley blinked. An extensive one? Financial history, personal history, business dealings, everything that concerns you. And if all of that comes back clean and your carefully constructed information doesn't turn out to be hiding any secrets, then we'll have another conversation. Tate reached into his pocket, pulled out a piece of gum, unwrapped it, and began chewing. I like my routine, he continued. I like knowing that I can have what I need when I need it. Going 3 months without Noah because you're taking him on a honeymoon doesn't exactly thrill me. Riley stared at him. I don't like Noah having other priorities that take precedence over me, and I don't have a patient bone in my body. Tate, I was just trying to explain. Are you going to have sex with Noah? Riley froze. Tate's knuckles cracked as he watched him. The question hung between them. Riley slowly exhaled. Tate didn't blink. Well, I don't feel comfortable talking about this, Riley said. Well, it's up to you, Tate replied. He continued chewing his gum, completely unfazed. If you don't want my billions after I'm dead, that's your decision. But every time people have sex in this family, it becomes my business, especially when pregnancy is possible. Riley stared at him. When people have children, whether they're married or not, those children can potentially have claims on my estate. Relationships create attachments. Attachments create obligations, and obligations can move money in directions it wasn't intended to go. Tate leaned back. So every time you become intimate with someone in this family, it becomes my business. Riley frowned. Sentiment and feelings happen when people become intimate. People get attached, they make decisions they wouldn't normally make. Suddenly, money starts flowing in a different direction because someone fell in love with someone they weren't supposed to. He paused. People can also use intimacy as leverage. They can manipulate, blackmail, threaten, or exploit someone because they know what that person desires. Tate looked directly at Riley. Anyone who has designs on someone in this family becomes my business. Riley remained silent. And as long as Noah takes a dime from this family every month, the people he surrounds himself with matter to me. Who he dates, who he trusts, who he lets into his life, and who gets close enough to influence him can affect my business. Tate's expression hardened. And my image. Riley swallowed. I'm not interested in controlling Noah's feelings, Tate said. I'm interested in understanding the consequences of the people he chooses to bring into his life. He popped his gum quietly. There's a difference. Riley swallowed. Tate looked at him. I'll repeat my question. He paused. Are you going to have regular relations with Noah after you get married? Riley hesitated. Yes, he said finally, I plan on having a regular intimate relationship with Noah. Tate's expression changed almost imperceptibly. Riley noticed. Tate didn't look happy with the answer. Not angry exactly. Something else. Something Riley couldn't quite identify. Then it occurred to him. Sexual jealousy. Riley studied Tate carefully. Could Tate actually be jealous of Noah being intimate with another man? The thought seemed almost absurd. But after everything Tate had said tonight, his insistence on having access to Noah, his refusal to accept being displaced from Noah's bed, his reaction to the idea of Riley marrying him, it suddenly didn't seem quite so absurd. Riley's stomach tightened. Maybe Tate wasn't simply afraid of losing his best friend. Maybe he was afraid of losing something he hadn't yet admitted he wanted. Riley asked a question he probably shouldn't have. Are you and Noah lovers? Tate's head snapped toward him. He glared at Riley as though Riley had just stepped over a boundary that should have been obvious. I think I have a right to know, Riley said carefully. I'm planning on marrying the man I'm engaged to. I think I have a right to know if there are going to be complications or unusual circumstances affecting my relationship with Noah. Tate's scowl deepened. Our relationship isn't exactly traditional, Riley continued. And it isn't exclusive. It's not that I would automatically feel betrayed or cheated on. Tate's expression became even darker. I'm just trying to understand what I'm walking into, Riley said, his voice becoming more cautious with every word. I think everyone involved in a sexual relationship should be informed and should consent to what's happening. That way nobody gets hurt and nobody misunderstands the situation. Tate said nothing. Riley waited. The silence stretched. Tate's jaw tightened. Finally, he looked at Riley with an expression that made Riley immediately regret asking the question. You're asking me, Tate said slowly, whether Noah and I are lovers. Riley nodded cautiously. Yes. Tate stared at him. Riley suddenly realized that whatever answer came next was going to change the entire conversation. Tate suddenly started laughing. He leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. It's funny how a little man like you thinks you can ask me personal questions as though I owe you an explanation. Riley shrank slightly in his chair. I have 1,000,000 times more money than you'll ever see in your entire life, and you think you can just walk into my personal space and start demanding answers. Riley said nothing. Tate's laughter faded. But he added, if I were in your position, I'd probably ask too. Riley looked at him cautiously. What has Noah told you? Tate asked. Riley's eyes wandered around the room. They landed on the golden shovel sitting ominously on Tate's desk. Then he looked back at Tate. He hasn't told me anything. Tate raised an eyebrow. We spent the night apart, Riley explained. We both drove separately to your mother's house for brunch. The only thing he texted me was, good morning, fiancé. Riley paused. I haven't really talked to him much since then. His gaze flicked toward the shovel again. So no, he hasn't told me anything. Tate let Riley finish what he was saying before answering. Yes, I consider Noah my lover. Riley went still. I'm not entirely sure what Noah would say, Tate continued. He's still in denial. As far as he's concerned, whatever happened between us was a mistake and he's not ready to look at our relationship objectively. Tate leaned back in his chair. So you might want to wait before asking him, give him some time to develop a more mature perspective on the whole situation. Riley glanced at him. I intend to keep Noah in my life. I intend to sleep beside him every night and have the kind of intimacy lovers have. Riley's expression tightened. I asked him to marry me, Tate added almost casually. And he rudely turned me down. Riley stared at him. You proposed to Noah? Yes. And he said no. Tate's jaw tightened. Quite emphatically. For the first time, Riley almost smiled. Tate noticed. Don't. The smile disappeared immediately. Riley was a little afraid of Tate. Just because Noah plays hard to get doesn't mean I'm giving up, Tate said. On the contrary, I haven't even started yet. Riley stared at him. I'll consider your marriage to Noah, Tate continued. But you're not getting married until June, that's just under a year away. He shrugged. So there's no rush for me to make up my mind. Riley frowned. You're actually serious about this? Completely. Tate leaned back in his chair. I have plenty of time to convince Noah that he made a mistake when he turned me down. Riley's expression tightened. As long as you don't keep me from seeing Noah, Tate continued, I have no reason to interfere with your relationship with him. Riley nodded slowly. Tate glanced toward the golden shovel resting on his desk. You want to marry Noah? Fine, I'm willing to consider it. He looked back at Riley. But June is a long way away. A faint smile appeared on Tate's face. Anything can happen between now and then. The anger disappeared from his expression so suddenly that it almost felt colder. More controlled. More dangerous. With your wedding 11 months away, Tate said, smiling smugly. That gives me plenty of time to seduce Noah and convince him to accept my proposal. The look on Tate's face made it obvious he was already thinking about how he was going to do it. Riley glared at him. Can't you just let me enjoy having Noah as my fiancé? Tate looked at him calmly. It's nothing personal, Riley. That's supposed to make me feel better. I would leave Noah alone if he hadn't responded to me or given in to my attention during the past 12 hours. Riley's expression tightened. But unfortunately, Tate continued, he's been very responsive. Tate's smile faded into something more thoughtful. That tells me he wants me back. Riley opened his mouth, but Tate continued before he could answer. As long as I see that coming from Noah, I'm going to keep trying. He paused. I'm very fond of Noah. There was no smugness in that last sentence. That was what made it harder for Riley to dismiss. Tate wasn't claiming Noah because of money, history, or some childish sense of entitlement. He genuinely cared about him. And apparently, Tate had decided 11 months was more than enough time to prove it. Without another word, Tate turned and walked back behind his father's desk. Riley frowned slightly, watching him. Tate opened one of the lower drawers with deliberate calm and removed an old leather checkbook. I have plenty of ways of talking people out of marrying Noah if I decide Noah deserves better, Tate said, or if I think he has limited himself by choosing someone who doesn't deserve him. Riley's expression tightened. Don't misunderstand me, Tate continued. I think you're an upstanding member of the community, you're a decent businessman, you understand networking, you seem competent at what you do, and from everything I've seen so far you're doing well for yourself. Riley waited. But are you worthy of Noah? Tate paused. No. Riley's eyebrows lifted. And it isn't because I want him instead of you. Tate leaned back. I don't think anyone is worthy of Noah. Riley stared at him. He's a rare find, a treasure, frankly, and he has the finest head of blonde hair I've ever had the opportunity to snuggle against. Riley blinked. Tate continued as though he'd just made a perfectly reasonable business assessment. No one on this planet deserves Noah. He looked directly at Riley. I'm simply trying to determine whether you're the least undeserving candidate. Riley's eyebrows lifted faintly. Tate sat down, flipped the cover open, uncapped a fountain pen, and finally looked up at him. Mr. Riley, Tate said evenly, name any amount. Riley blinked once. Excuse me. The amount, Tate tapped the blank check lightly with the pen. Whatever number will make you leave this house and everyone in it in peace. For a moment, Riley genuinely thought he had misunderstood him. Then realization settled in. Slowly. You're trying to buy me off. I'm offering you a financial settlement. Riley stared at him in disbelief. Tate continued calmly, almost professionally now. You break off the engagement, you leave Noah alone, you remove yourself from his life permanently. Tate met his eyes directly. And in return, I'll give you anything you want. The sheer confidence in his voice made the offer even more surreal. Riley laughed softly once. You cannot be serious. I'm perfectly serious. Tate. Mr. Blue. Riley stared at him. Tate's expression never changed. This isn't a negotiation between friends, Tate said quietly. So yes, Mr. Blue. Riley let out a slow breath through his nose. You think this is normal? No, Tate folded his hands together lightly atop the desk. I think this is efficient. You're trying to purchase access to Noah's life. No, Tate's eyes sharpened slightly. I'm trying to remove someone from it. Riley shook his head in disbelief. You really think Noah would forgive this if he found out? Tate's expression barely flickered. I always tell Noah when I buy someone off, that's how he knows they're not a decent human being. I've bought off at least 8 men in the last 5 years who had nefarious reasons to be around Noah, sniffing and trying to get their hooks in his tender flesh. I bought them off with pocket change, and I'm sure you're probably of the same variety yourself. The certainty in Tate's voice irritated Riley immediately. You seem very confident about what I'll do. Because I know people, Tate leaned back slightly. Everybody has a number, money, opportunity, status, security, something. Riley laughed again, more stunned than amused now. This is insane. You haven't heard the offer yet. I don't need to. I'll pay you $50 million to leave Noah alone. Riley stared at Tate. Tate picked up a pen and held it over the blank check, waiting for Riley to respond. $50 million. Yes. Riley looked at the empty check, then back at Tate. Tate remained completely calm. Based on what you make now, roughly $500,000 a year, $50 million would pay the equivalent of your salary for the next 100 years. Riley let out a disbelieving laugh. You're serious? Completely. Tate tapped the pen against the check. That's more money than you'll probably ever earn in your lifetime. Riley stared at him. And this is the starting bid. Tate nodded. I'm willing to go higher. Riley pushed back in his chair. Are you trying to buy my fiancé? No. Tate's answer came immediately. I'm trying to buy the possibility that you'll walk away from him. Riley's expression hardened. That's not the same thing. To me it is. Tate looked down at the blank check. Noah's happiness means everything to me. If there's even the slightest chance that you would take the money and leave him, then it's worth whatever the cost is. Riley couldn't speak for a moment. He had expected Tate to be jealous. He had expected him to be possessive. He had even expected threats. He hadn't expected $50 million. Riley looked at the check again. Then at Tate. You're completely insane. Tate smiled faintly. Probably. Riley shook his head. You're offering me 100 years of my salary just to get me away from Noah. Yes. And you're willing to go higher. Yes. Riley stared at him. For the first time, he understood that Tate wasn't negotiating for money. He was negotiating for Noah. And Tate apparently had no intention of letting the price stop him. Yes, you do, Tate gestured lightly with the pen, because I'm not insulting you with some low figure and an escort off the property. Riley folded his arms. This should be interesting. Tate nodded once, as if they were discussing business mergers instead of human relationships. If money interests you, the account can be immediate. No taxes routed back to you personally, no legal complications. Riley stared. If money doesn't interest you, Tate continued calmly, then I can offer connections, career advancement, endorsements, employment opportunities, travel, partnerships, property access, investments. He slid the blank check slightly forward across the desk. Assets, stocks, networking introductions, whatever field you're trying to break into, I can accelerate it. Riley looked genuinely speechless now. Tate kept going. Anything you want that exists within reason financially or socially, I can provide. His voice lowered slightly, far more than you could ever dream of obtaining on your own. Riley's expression cooled immediately at that line. There it is, he muttered. Tate narrowed his eyes. There what is? The part where you remind me, you think you're above everybody else. Tate ignored that completely. In exchange, he continued evenly, you leave Noah alone. Silence. You break off the engagement. Riley's face hardened. You do not contact him again socially or privately. Tate. Mr. Blue. Riley scoffed openly this time. If you encounter him at events, Tate continued, you leave. If he reaches out emotionally, you disengage. If he attempts to reconnect romantically, you remove yourself from the situation entirely. Riley stared at him. You disappear from his life, Tate finished quietly, and I'll make sure you never regret it financially. The room felt deathly still afterward. Then Riley asked softly, how long have you wanted to do this? Tate's grip tightened slightly on the pen. Long enough you don't understand, he said quietly. No, Riley agreed, I really don't. Tate stood slowly again. You think this is about jealousy? What else would it be? This is about prevention. Prevention of what? Tate's eyes darkened slightly. You might ruin his life. Riley stared at him. By loving him. By marrying him when he doesn't know what he actually wants. That's convenient. It's true. No, Riley said firmly. What's true is that you cannot stand somebody else becoming important to him. Tate's composure slipped slightly at that. You think you're protecting Noah, Riley continued, but really you're trying to preserve your place beside him. Tate laughed softly. You say that like it's unreasonable. It is unreasonable. No, Tate shook his head slowly. What's unreasonable is pretending Noah proposed to you because he's deeply fulfilled. Riley's jaw tightened. He proposed because he's tired, Tate continued, because he wants quiet, stability, predictability. And that's bad. It is when somebody mistakes emotional exhaustion for readiness. Riley took a step closer to the desk. You know what I think, he asked quietly. Tate said nothing. I think Noah loves you in some deeply unhealthy way neither of you fully understands. Riley's voice remained calm, which somehow made the words hit harder. And instead of dealing with that honestly, you sabotage every person who gets close to him. I'm not sabotaging you. You offered me a payoff. I offered you freedom. Riley laughed sharply. Freedom. Everyone in Los Angeles knows Noah is connected to me, Tate said. They know I'm worth billions, they know he's my beneficiary. Riley listened quietly. That means every ravenous wolf within 3,000 miles could look at Noah and see a fortune waiting for them. Tate's expression hardened. Someone could marry him for all the wrong reasons. They could pretend to love him because they know what he stands to inherit. Riley frowned. So what are you going to do? Tate didn't hesitate. I'm willing to disinherit Noah. Riley stared at him. What? If my money is what makes Noah attractive to the wrong people, I'll take the money away. That doesn't sound very protective. It is. Tate looked at him seriously. If my fortune gives a gold digger a reason to get their hooks into him, then I don't want Noah to have access to it. Riley shook his head. You'd really give up having him inherit billions. If that's what it takes. Tate's voice softened. If Noah doesn't have enough money to attract bad people, maybe he'll have a better chance of finding someone who actually loves him. Riley stared at him. For Tate, the fortune wasn't sacred. Noah was. And if Tate had to sacrifice billions to make sure someone loved Noah for Noah rather than for his inheritance, he apparently wouldn't think twice. Tate continued. Even if I disinherit Noah, there are circumstances where I would still step in financially. Riley looked at him. If he were bankrupt, if he became homeless, if he had a medical emergency, if he needed a life-threatening surgery and couldn't afford it. Tate's expression was firm. I would never let Noah suffer because he didn't have money. Riley nodded slowly. But whoever he married, Tate continued, would never receive a dime from me. Riley raised an eyebrow. Not one. Not one. Tate leaned back. They wouldn't benefit from living in luxury simply because they're with Noah. No expensive houses, no cars, no vacations, no access to my accounts, nothing. And Noah would be taken care of if he genuinely needed help. Tate paused. But his partner would never be allowed to mistake my generosity toward Noah for generosity toward them. Riley stared at him. So you'd make sure Noah was safe without making his partner wealthy. Exactly. Tate's voice softened. I want someone to love Noah because he's Noah. He looked toward the doorway. Not because they looked at his last name, his bank account, and the inheritance waiting for them. Tate continued. You'll probably be working for the next 40 years of your life. Riley frowned. $50 million would let you retire tomorrow. Tate gestured toward the blank check. You could walk away with enough money that you would never have to work another day in your life. Riley stared at him. And if you're only interested in Noah because of his money, then marrying someone who doesn't have access to that money wouldn't make any sense. Tate's voice remained perfectly calm. If you're a gold digger, you would have no reason to stay. Noah wouldn't be able to give you the lifestyle you're expecting. You wouldn't inherit anything from me. You wouldn't benefit from being married to him. He pushed the check slightly closer. So logically, your best option would be to accept the $50 million. Riley looked at the check. Tate continued. You'd walk away wealthy, retire tomorrow, and Noah would be free to find someone who actually wants him. Riley looked back at him. You've really thought this through. Yes. That's the disturbing part. Tate shrugged. I prefer practical solutions. Riley glanced at the blank check again. $50 million isn't a practical solution. Tate smiled faintly. It's a very practical solution. Riley shook his head. You're trying to buy me out of my own engagement. No, Tate said, I'm giving you an opportunity to prove that money isn't why you're marrying Noah. Riley went silent. Tate tapped the pen against the check. If you don't want the money, then I have my answer. Riley stared at him. For the first time, the check felt less like an offer and more like a test. And even if you marry Noah after I disinherit him, don't think you're going to get anything simply because you're associated with me. Riley looked at Tate. Tate's expression was completely serious. If you're a gold digger and you marry Noah because of my name, because you think my name will open doors for you, get you into exclusive rooms, introduce you to powerful people, or give you opportunities you couldn't get on your own, think again. He leaned back. All I have to do is make one phone call. Riley's expression tightened. And my name will give you nothing. Tate let the words settle. No invitations, no introductions, no favors, no access, no business opportunities because you're Noah's spouse. Riley stared at him. You'd really shut every door. If someone marries Noah for access to me, yes. Tate's voice remained calm. My name is mine, my relationships are mine, my influence is mine. He paused. No one gets to use Noah as a key to unlock them. Riley looked at the check still sitting on the table. So your message is basically, marry Noah for Noah or don't expect anything from you. Exactly. Tate's eyes hardened. If you love him, you won't need anything from me. Riley didn't know what to think. Yes, Tate's eyes locked onto his. I protect Noah because he doesn't have the experience or knowledge to know the pitfalls of being associated with affluent people, freedom from a marriage that will eventually make both of you miserable. You don't know that. I know Noah. You know the version of Noah that exists around you. That visibly irritated Tate. Riley continued before he could interrupt. You act like you own some deeper understanding of him than everyone else. I do. No, Riley said firmly, you just built your identity around being needed by him. The room went silent again. Tate's voice lowered dangerously. You really believe you understand what exists between us? I think whatever exists between you is exactly why Noah should probably get away from this family for a while. That hit something explosive. Tate's expression sharpened immediately. You don't get to decide that. And you do. I know what's best for him. Riley stared at him for several long seconds. Then quietly. That's the exact sentence controlling people always use. For the first time all evening, genuine anger flashed openly across Tate's face. You're very brave standing in my house talking to me like that. And you're very comfortable trying to control Noah through everyone around him. Tate slammed the checkbook shut sharply. The sound echoed through the study. I am trying, he said carefully, to prevent Noah from throwing his future away because he's emotionally confused. Riley's expression hardened too now. And what happens if Noah chooses me anyway? Tate looked at him silently. I don't believe he will. You sound scared. That landed. Tate's jaw flexed. Riley stepped closer. You know what I think really terrifies you? Riley asked quietly, not losing Noah. Tate said nothing. I think you're terrified Noah might actually be happier without you. The silence afterward felt suffocating. Then Tate smiled faintly. Not warmly. Not kindly. Coldly. If Noah was truly happy with you, Tate said softly, you wouldn't be standing in this room defending your engagement to me right now. Tate rolled his eyes slowly, leaning back against the edge of the desk as he stared at Riley with open disbelief now. God, he thought, Noah really had picked the most painfully naive man imaginable. Riley still believed in harmonious marriages. Instability. In love with solving things cleanly. Tate could practically see it written all over him, the optimism, the sincerity, the belief that devotion and patience could somehow keep people from eventually destroying each other emotionally. It almost made Tate laugh. There's no such thing as a happy marriage, Tate said flatly. Riley frowned immediately. That's a miserable thing to believe. It's a realistic thing to believe. No, Riley replied calmly, it's what people say when they're terrified of vulnerability. Tate smirked faintly at that. You really think this is about fear? I think you've convinced yourself that intimacy always becomes possession or destruction. Tate's expression cooled. The sooner you realize people don't stay happy forever, he continued, ignoring Riley's comment, the better off you'll be before you hang a noose around your own neck pretending it's a wedding ring, or as I've labeled it, the suffering aka the suffering. Riley stared at him. You genuinely think marriage is that bleak? I think permanence makes people cruel. I think permanence makes people cruel eventually. That says more about you than marriage. Tate laughed softly under his breath while smiling. Maybe.